Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republicans podcast, where we get to learn a little bit more about the legislators that you have sent to the State House. And today we are very, very blessed to have Tony Wisniewski with us, and he represents Legislative District 5 in Seat B, and he's in fourth term. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about Tony. And he was born in L.A., believe it or not, so you're one of the good Californians, though, right?
Most recently, I came here from Colorado, so when people ask me where I came from, when I say Colorado, I'm not lying to them.
Okay, that's great. You're a graduate of Utah State University. You've got a BS in mechanical engineering. You're a small business owner. You were one time an industry rep of the Career Technical Education Advisory Group, which is cool. And you have the most important part of your life. You have a lovely wife named Melody. You've been married for over 45 years. You have 5 children, and then you didn't say in your bio how many grandchildren because they're probably cranking up. What's the number now?
Currently, it's 21.
21. Now, that's a quiver.
And there's another one on the way. Depending on when I write the bio, it may or may not be accurate.
Wow. Yeah, and that's why it's just smart to say I have a lot of grandchildren. Yes, well done, sir. Representative Wisniewski, tell us first about Legislative District 5. Where is it, and what do your people care about? What do your constituents want you to do in the State House?
Legislative District 5 is the southwest corner of Kootenai County, and it includes primarily Post Falls and the surrounding area. It also goes down to the southern border of the county, which is down to the Worley area near the tribe. Some of the things that members of or constituents in District 5 care about are education, obviously. We have a couple of good CTE facilities. We've got the Parker Center and we've got K-Tech there, which are joint with NIC and some of the high schools. So we do have a good, strong program there that was provided for by some of the strong members of industry up in the North Idaho area.
And there's specialties of those CTE efforts?
There are.
And what are they? What industries?
Some of the industries are auto mechanics, diesel mechanics, culinary arts, a few other programs as well.
Fantastic. And then is there any legislative issues? Is it fiscally conservative, small government, Second Amendment? Like, what are the big issues in your...
The area that I represent, fortunately for me, is very conservative, fiscally and socially. Some of the issues that are affected this time around are illegal immigration. It's not too much of a problem up north, but it does affect the entire state, and therefore, with a large number of illegal immigrants in the area, that tends to absorb available housing. And when you do that, it excludes other people who have a more legitimate right to purchase those houses. So with that issue taken care of more carefully, that will free up some housing and reduce the median price of homes. Right now in Kootenai County, since we are one of the fastest growing areas in the state, median price of homes is over $550,000.
Wow.
So it's even higher than some areas down here in the Boise area.
So, Representative, tell us which committees on which you serve here in the State House.
I serve on the Education Committee. That's a committee that I've been on for the whole 8 years that I've been here. I am also on the Commerce Committee. It's Commerce and Human Resources. I'm the vice chairman of that particular committee. And I also serve on the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, and I was a past vice chairman for that committee as well.
And you're the vice chair now of Commerce and Human Resources.
That is correct, yes.
So I should have asked you earlier, but what inspired you to run for the State House in the first place, Representative?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't seek this position. The position sought me.
Oh, tell me about that.
I was asked to fill in for one of our representatives back about 2013 or 14, who moved to the Senate because the previous person had created a vacancy. So they were looking for somebody to run, and I told them that certainly they could find somebody with better name recognition, better financial support, and was more interested in the job than I might be. And they said they had asked several people and they got turned down. So I thought about it and prayed about it and got the consent from my family and wife, and decided to stick my toe into the pool
There you go.
of politics.
And 8 years later, here you
Yes. The first time they came around, back in around 2013, 14, I told them I could not take the job because I had a full-time position as a person that worked in production. And I was constantly out on the manufacturing floor, not just doing a desk job that might be pushed off to a later time. I was afraid that my company might hire a Fred off the street, and when I came back after 3 months, they might say, you know, Fred has been doing such a great job and he's really mastered all the jobs that you had.
Adios, amigo.
We're keeping Fred, and
Right.
So sorry, so sad, so bad. But I couldn't afford to do that with a family and a mortgage and everything else. So 4 years later, I retired, and within 2 weeks of my retirement, they came by and said, Tony, you gave us a valid excuse 4 years ago. We heard that you have just retired. What's your excuse this time?
I'm like, I don't have any.
I
in.
didn't have a valid.
You got me.
So anyway, they corralled me, and I got voluntold to take the job. I do not regret taking the job. It's been a very educational experience and very rewarding.
Okay, so let's talk about some important work that you are doing in the State House. You know, sometimes there's issues and they are arcane, but they are dramatically impactful to our lives. And the Universal Commercial Code sounds pretty benign until you actually get into the details of it. And that's something you decided to do. And you are working very hard on House Bill 702 to make some changes to Article 9, 8, and 9 of the Universal Commercial Code as it applies to Idaho. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, Article 8, just so everyone knows, it defines the types of securities covered, including stocks and bonds, establishes rules for transfer of securities and the rights of the parties involved, addresses the concept of security entitlement for investors. Now, so what? Like, what does this mean to us? Why are you alarmed?
Well,
rightfully alarmed.
I would like to make a minor correction. It's the Uniform Commercial Code as opposed to Universal Commercial Code, which I think you mentioned.
Oh, okay.
It's easy to get those terms mixed up. Let me give you, by way of history, exactly what the issue appears to be. Back in the old days, and this goes back to 70s and 80s, if you purchased stock in a company, you would be issued a paper certificate. That certificate was full ownership right, assuming it wasn't fraudulently produced, full ownership right of a certain percentage of a particular company. Similarly, it applies to bonds and other financial assets in the securities market. As we developed beyond the 70s and the 80s, we went to highfalutin words like dematerialization. In other words, instead of getting a stock certificate or a physical bond, you were given a digital
book entry
in the broker's financial recording system. He would use a bank to finance his operations, and that bank typically had borrowing capabilities from other banks as well. And so this chain of intermediaries, as the new term was applied, went all the way up to a DTCC. It's a Deposit Trust Clearing Corporation, which basically clears the books of all of the stock transfers and bond transfers and other securities transfers throughout the day. So it's basically a way of making sure that all the entries have been entered in the debit and the credit sections of everybody's account. Now, as the digital book entries became made, it was easier to leave off information like who actually purchased those securities. You had a relationship with your broker, so he knew exactly how many shares you bought or sold during the day. And as it went further up the chain, there was a loss of identification of individual ownership. The numbers worked out okay. Now, if you think of a correlation between the stock certificate and other forms of ownership, think of a deed that
deed
you
on
own
a house
on
or-
your
yep.
house. There's two types of deeds. One is
Title on your car.
title on your car, but getting back to like a house, there is a trust deed which says you have a material financial interest in the home, but you don't own it yet. The bank is holding the deed in trust for you. It gives you an ownership interest, but not full ownership. If you get a warranty deed after you've paid all your mortgages and any other fees and
Debts, liens, everything.
you
Yep.
clear it off the books, you get what they call a warranty deed. And the title insurance company, and in some cases the bank, will absolutely guarantee you own full title that's unencumbered. If there was a mistake by not having them catch a lien that was filed against it, they would make good on that. So that
Right.
warranty deed was 100% ownership in that house, with the exception of your property tax that you have to pay every year. So don't forget that
Right.
you're basically a
Hopefully
renter.
less and less.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, legislature.
That's correct. So same thing with the title on a car. It is yours. If you don't own the car, you still get a title, and it indicates that there is a secondary lien on the
Right.
car from a
Right.
bank or a credit union and so forth. 1994, the Uniform Commercial Code was modified allegedly to protect purchasers from financial failures of banks, like in the 1987 stock market crash. However, what they did is they came up with a couple of new terms. One is an entitlement holder and a security interest. Now, with being an entitlement holder further up the chain, you no longer had full ownership rights. You had an entitlement to that document, very much similar to a title, or not a warranty deed, but a trust deed.
Okay.
In the event of a terrible financial calamity like the insolvency of a bank that might lead to foreclosure, whoever had control of those digital book entries was now given the legal right to ownership of that asset, and they could claim that asset as their own in order to keep them out of insolvency. Now, if
So they're owning your
yes, the
stocks.
ownership has now shifted from the purchaser of the stock or bond to the controller. And there's
took all the risk, by the way.
we took the risk. We assumed that we had the ownership of that asset. That is no longer the case. Now, as I said, this involves, this would be only triggered in the event of an Armageddon type of financial failure. But we've seen some of these in the past. If you look at the Lehman Brothers, I will say it right out publicly, they were greedy. They went into financial assets that were extremely risky. They took collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, and mortgage-backed securities. They got an outside insurance agency like AIG and others to stamp those as AAA
Right.
guaranteed. When they started using those securities as collateral to borrow money on, and the banks that looked at those assets found that they were really substandard, their line of credit started to dry up and they could no longer borrow money against those assets. And that's what started to unzip the whole Lehman Brothers.
Well, I worked for Bear Stearns, so I know a little bit about that.
There you go. Bear Stearns
Representative
was in
Wisniewski.
very close to the same condition.
So let's talk about, so what changes are you proposing in House Bill 702 to make sure that we don't lose control over our assets, our stocks, our bonds, then the bank doesn't take them or some fiduciary doesn't take them from us?
Well, there's two major things that we have to do. First of all, we have to unwind the changes that were made in the 1994 Section 8 and Section 9 that under certain circumstances, like I said, under a severe case of insolvency, would allow the transfer of the ownership of those assets to the bank that was in trouble and maintain that ownership in our account. It seems like a very simple request. What I purchased, I should own. I have not given my consent to a bank or a broker above me in the chain all the way up to the clearinghouse. I have not given consent to allow them to use my assets to cover their shortfall. As I said, in the case of Lehman Brothers or MF Global, those two banks or securities agencies failed because of greed. In the case of Lehman Brothers, they did proprietary trading in their own account, which is where they took money that belonged to perhaps customers or some of their own internal money, and they leveraged those in order to buy what they considered somewhat safe investments. Instead of the normal leverage ratio of 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 or 20 to 1, they actually went as high as 44 to 1.
Wow.
So once that starts to unzip, the price, the
collapses.
value of those securities drops, and so they have to put up more margin to cover it, and the whole thing just started to collapse. In the case of MF Global, they invested in some very risky European bonds for nations that didn't have a very good credit rating, hoping to hit the mother load,
right.
And they didn't do that, and so that unzipped. Now, some people will say, well, we have agencies like in the banking industry, the FDIC, which is not applicable to the securities market.
That's correct.
FDIC covers, it's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It handles the cash and checks in a normal bank or savings and loan.
And only up to $250,000, by the way.
Per account,
Per
yes.
account.
The SIPC is the Securities Investors Protection Corporation. It is not a federal agency. It is a private organization funded by members of that organization. Now, they have a deposit that they're shooting for of $5 billion, and they also have a line of credit of about $2.7 billion from the Treasury, so it's just a line of credit. Those two funds together will only cover about 15,000 accounts.
Right.
Once that happens, they are dry and the whole system crashes. So it's really a public relations asset that the SIPC has to make the public comfortable.
Calm down, yeah.
Exactly, that we do have enough funds to cover a minor bank failure. A major bank failure will never be covered by this. And so once again, if we have a major bank collapse in the securities area, the SIPC can't cover it.
So the Universal Commercial Code is that a national thing? And then you're trying to say, hey, in Idaho, as far as the UCC is concerned, we are reinterpreting, or we're going to redo Article 8 and 9 so that we can kind of make sure that we don't ever run these risks where people's own stocks, own bonds, own personal property at risk. Is that what you're trying to do with the bill? Yes,
the Uniform Commercial Code is an attempt that has been around for decades, and it treats more than just the securities. It also covers banking and other relationships between commercial entities. So the issue of securities is only one part that they cover. It is an attempt to make sure that companies dealing with various states do not have to come up with unique contracts or unique requirements from state to state. And our attempt, or our intent rather, is to wind back the changes that were made in 1994 to give Idaho consumers, Idaho investors, full rights to their assets without having to hand them over to an agency, in this case a bank, for instance, to use as their assets to keep them out of insolvency.
So let me ask you a question, a practical question. JP Morgan Chase is headquartered in New York,
yes,
right? Wells Fargo is headquartered in San Francisco. So here we are in Idaho. So how do you make a New York bank or a San Francisco bank adhere to Idaho Uniform Commercial Code?
You stole my thunder, Mr.
Sorry.
Miller, and that's quite all right. I was going to get to the second phase, and that is, in order to make these changes, we have to make sure that we change another part of the law, which is the location of law that applies to the changes we've made. Obviously, if we didn't do that, if we didn't say the state of Idaho's laws shall apply in these cases, and we allowed it to default to the location of JP Morgan in New York or some other bank in San Francisco, we would defer to the laws in those states, in which case
They're not going to help us.
they're not going to help us at all. So if you don't have the marriage between, hey, we want full ownership and we want the laws of Idaho, which we have changed to protect our consumers, if we don't have those two simultaneously, one without the other does us no good at all.
Well, Representative Wisniewski, let's talk about one other aspect of the Uniform Commercial Code, and that's Article 9, which deals with transactions involving personal property and creating perfecting security interests, secured parties, and debtors. That also, you would like to see that dealt with at the same time.
Right.
Okay.
The issue of perfection just means that a debtor, or actually a creditor, has filed with the appropriate agency the paperwork that gives them claim to the asset that they are owed. Let me give you an example. It is not too unsimilar to a mechanic working on your house and he hasn't been paid, so he files a
lien.
Mechanic's lien against your property. He gets it properly recorded at the clerk's office, and now he has a claim that is superior to somebody else that's walking off the street and said, hey, Tony owes me money because I put some sprinklers in his front yard. Well,
Right.
Where's your contract? Where's your lien that's filed against the property? Where is it recorded? So perfection just applies to that particular thing.
Perfect. Well, Godspeed. Where's that bill right now?
It was going to be heard today, but there were some other bills that had
Yes.
a higher priority. I'd like to make one other statement, if I might.
Absolutely.
And this is the issue of hypothecation. In other words, allowing someone else to take ownership of your contract or your assets. In the case of MF Global, they went bankrupt in 2011. It wasn't until 2014 that most of the cases were settled, and none of them at 100%.
Wow.
They had some Canadian accounts for Canadian citizens. Those got settled in 10 days because they did not have the Uniform Commercial Code applicability of takeover of assets. So if you are a consumer, if you are a pension holder, if you have funds in a brokerage account, would you like to have your assets cleared up in 10 days, or would you like to wait 2 or 3 years, as in the case of
Wow.
MF Global?
And not get paid 100 cents on the dollar either.
And spend time and money. Now, for a retiree who is depending on pension funds, that 2 to 3 years can really put them behind the 8 ball.
Okay, now we're going to switch to a completely different topic, but I know it's one that's close to your heart, and that is House Joint Memorial 17. And it deals with Obergefell versus Hodges, and that is about marriage. Tell us about why that's so important to you. And you actually brought this, right? You're bringing this joint memorial?
I am bringing a memorial that is very similar to one that was brought last year.
You're
Last
right, in
year
2025, right?
Last year was House Joint Memorial 1, and it passed the House with a 46 to 24 vote, so almost a 2-to-1, almost a veto-proof amount, which would require 47 votes. Now, we don't need a veto-proof because
It's a
this
memorial.
Doesn't
It doesn't go to the
before
governor.
Exactly, so he has no opportunity to veto it, even if he wanted to.
So what does this do in addition to the one that was passed last year?
It doesn't do anything different. It's just a
Restatement.
Last year, this got stalled in the Senate. It didn't make it through the State Affairs
there it
Committee
is.
in the Senate. It didn't even get a hearing. So we're trying to resurrect it and get a hearing in the Senate. If there's any indication of interest over in the Senate compared to what we have in the House, it should clear fairly handily. And it's nothing real severe. We're not asking for an outcome. All we're asking for is that the Supreme Court revisit their decision that they made in 2015, which was the Obergefell versus Hodges decision, where they basically struck down the constitutional or statutory limitations from about 30 states, 30 plus states, where the state said that we consider marriage to be between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court said that same-sex, quote, marriages, and I hate to use that word, and same-sex in the same context or in the same sentence, because there is no marriage between two men or two women. Our state constitution was modified in 2006 with a constitutional amendment that was passed by the people with over a 63% majority, and we defined marriage as a union between a man and one woman. Now, you say, well, why do we even have to have a constitutional amendment? And the real reason is because there was a flurry of court cases and laws that started to veer away from the traditional meaning of marriage between a man and a woman and towards same-sex unions,
Mm-hmm.
which they violated many people's religious beliefs in calling it a marriage, whereas in fact, it can't even be a marriage. If I may, I'd like to read a definition from a dictionary on what marriage is.
Please.
Do we have time to do
Oh,
that?
of course you do.
This is the American Dictionary of the English Language, and this was the understanding of marriage back in the 19th century when Idaho was granted its territorial
Yes.
rights and also statehood.
Happy Idaho Day, by the way.
There you go.
This
That
past
was just
week.
a couple days ago. The definition reads, marriage is the act of uniting a man and woman for life. Wedlock, the legal union of a man and woman for life. Marriage is a contract both civil and religious by which the parties engage to live together in mutual affection and fidelity till death shall separate them. Marriage was instituted by God himself for the purpose of preventing the promiscuous intercourse of the sexes, for promoting domestic felicity, and for securing the maintenance and education of children. So all those things are what the state of Idaho or
And that's a
territory of
definition
Idaho.
from a dictionary, you said? Where was that from?
Yes, this is from 1828. So this is just prior to us becoming a territory. And this is the understanding that Idahoans have had until the tumultuous social upheaval times of the 60s and 70s when we had free love, drugs, anti-war protests, Supreme Court decisions that were completely incongruent with previous 100 years of jurisprudence at the Supreme Court level throughout the state. Radical feminism and a whole bunch of other things that started to change the social conscience of the United States. And we here in Idaho still want to maintain the traditional definition of marriage, and that's why it is particularly irritating to many who hold religious beliefs that we call a domestic partnership between two members of the same sex a marriage. It is not a marriage according to the traditional definition.
Where would
of
if this
marriage.
gets through the House again, where would it go in the Senate?
It would go to the Senate State Affairs Committee
State
as well.
Affairs Committee, okay.
Yes.
Now, House Joint Memorial 17 essentially says that Idaho legislators are committed to restoring the definition of marriage of one man and one woman, and that they urge the Supreme Court of the United States to reconsider Obergefell versus Hodges. We should remind people that that decision was only a 5-4 vote.
That's right. It was
And now the Supreme Court has changed quite dramatically, and we should also remind people that in his dissent, Clarence Thomas was very, very clear that this decision, as he said, it stretched the doctrine of substantive due process rights found in the 14th Amendment, and he stretched it too far.
That's correct. It's very interesting. There was a Minnesota Supreme Court case that was brought to Minnesota as a result of the Loving versus Virginia case. And in that particular case, the Minnesota Supreme Court could not make the connection between banning of interracial marriages with the banning of same-sex marriages. They said there was absolutely no connection, no logical application of allowing interracial marriages to allowing same-sex marriages. The Supreme Court was offered that same case that they didn't request. It was offered up through the appellate process, and they basically said that there was absolutely no federal issue that needed to be answered in that case. So they refused to even hear it.
Jeez.
So here's the Supreme Court saying that they had no business.
Well, the composition of the court is certainly different, and obviously Roe v. Wade was heard when we thought that may never happen, right? And that indeed it did happen. So perhaps the encouragement of many states through joint memorials like this will encourage SCOTUS to take that up. So,
Yes, if I may add something,
please.
there are about another half dozen states that are also offering up this kind of a memorial or resolution to request the Supreme Court to reconsider their decision back then.
well, thank you for the work you're doing on that House Joint Memorial. And we thank you for joining us on the Idaho House Republicans podcast. Been just the pleasure to visit with Tony Wisniewski, and he represents Legislative District 5 in Seat B, and he's in his 4th term. And as we always say before we sign off, God bless the great state of Idaho, and thank you once again for joining us today, Representative Wisniewski.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak today.
God bless.
Thank you.
Sunrise on the Snake River plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way.